In today's video, we need to talk about Newcastle United. They're in the cup final, and although Liverpool look unstoppable right now, they have a very good chance in the cup final because Newcastle have gone toe-to-toe with every top team this season. They drew to Liverpool, they drew to City, they beat Arsenal multiple times, they beat Manchester United, they beat Tottenham. I'm not sure if Man United and Tottenham can class as top sides this season, but you know my point. They're through to the next round of the FA Cup as well, and what a game that game was. And they're doing very well in the Premier League. If you come fifth place, there's a 99.9% chance that you're going to be in the Champions League next season. Chelsea are dropping off. Newcastle have a good chance of being in the Champions League next year. And in today's video, we're going to talk about why rivals and other clubs are starting to fear Newcastle. We're going to talk about the top clubs and why, Newcastle coming in with these new owners that are ambitious is obviously going to be a challenge. But also in terms of the players that they have, and that's why Riot was a bit fearful of Newcastle. They've got ambitious owners, they've got good players, they've got a good manager, they've got a sustainable project in the sense of they're young players, they're building for the future. I think the direction they've gone in with the signings of Lewis Hall and Livramento have been really good. And as a Man United fan, I'm looking at Newcastle and how they can build upon their squad to reach that next level. And I'm thinking, that foundation of the Newcastle squad is good. I think they can keep on to Isak and Bruno G if they're in Europe next season. Top players. I know Isak is linked to Arsenal 24/7, but I just see him staying at Newcastle. I really do. They put 50 million bids on the likes of Alanga and Elise, and some of there's going to be a bit of money there, maybe in Buemo, who knows. But also, I just look at Eddie Howe, and what I actually wanted to talk about in this video was just Eddie Howe and how he schooled Arteta and how other clubs are looking at thinking and saying, you know what, they've got a serious manager, they've got some serious players, they've got owners that are obviously ambitious and want to invest, and they're on a good path. So I'm going to talk about Newcastle and what inspired me to make this video, and I meant to make it yesterday, but I went out, I enjoyed my weekend, I thought I'd take the weekend off. Is Eddie Howe schooling Arteta, and I spoke about this in my match reaction, and I spoke about this on Twitter. Eddie Howe deserves more credit for getting his tactics spot on and outsmarting Arteta again. The high man-to-man press with centre-back stepping up caused Arsenal so many problems. This was at, of course, St James's Park, but Newcastle had a 2-0 lead going into that game, and I think Eddie Howe setting up with players like Trippier and a bit more defensive approach, knowing at the 2-0 lead, but then also baiting, with the press baiting Arsenal and having Gordon so high up because Murphy and Lewis Hall were doing so much pressing and tracking people like Timber and all of that. Everything was perfect. Gordon had the freedom to stay higher. One of the centre-backs was stepping up. Hall and Murphy pressing, allowed Gordon the freedom to stay higher. Gordon was everywhere. Isak was there in the positions where Isak thrives. Him and Gordon were high. At times, it was almost like two up top. When Newcastle dropped and they organised the low block, Trippier was there with a captain, a leadership performance, organising Newcastle the low block and everything. And Newcastle's game plan was so superior to Arsenal. It had been in all those games. In all those big games, I look at it, they've got results versus City, they've got 3-3 versus Liverpool, but they've set up well. They've gone toe-to-toe with these top sides. They've gone there physically. And I think with players like Tonali coming in over Longstaff, who would have played last year due to Tonali's suspension, you can see the level up technically at Newcastle United. And Newcastle beat Arsenal because their game plan was superior. They've got a better front line as well. I think had they had Martinelli and Havertz and Arsenal had Gordon and Isak, it definitely could have been a different game. But Eddie Howe has not had any investment this summer, and he got his tactics spot on. And I feel like there's not enough discussion about that. There's not enough discussion giving Eddie Howe credit. You got a lot of stick last year, but you've got to look at the injury crisis, what he's gone through. He didn't really get any investment this summer because Lloyd Kelly's gone. I tell you what, you guys got. Did you get 15 million for Lloyd Kelly? You got him for free. But anyway, Newcastle have done well in various senses, and Eddie Howe hasn't got the credit he deserves this season. He hasn't got the credit because when Newcastle beat Arsenal and you look at all of Eddie Howe's tactical changes and the roles of Trippier and the roles of Gordon and the centre-back stepping up in the press, no, Sky Sports don't want to talk about that. Sky Sports want to talk about Isak to Arsenal. Oh, you can see in this game, this is why Arsenal is a striker. Isak, Arsenal. No, talk about Eddie Howe. Talk about the tactics. I said that in my match reaction. And I want to talk about Eddie Howe and I want to talk about what Newcastle are building in their squad. because I feel like they've got something going on, and that it's the base of a foundation. They get that goalkeeper in, they get that Mbuemo type right winger in. Maybe with Willock set to go, they get another body in midfield, because I don't think Longstaff is good enough, and you need a bit of depth there. Someone to push Joelinton. They get that long-term right centre back to come in because Jara's aging. Hopefully, Botman, for your sake, stays fit, and then they probably might look at a striker to rotate with Isak. I think Callum Wilson, if he can stay fit, is a very good second option, but he cannot stay fit. You look at it like that. You know, Harvey Barnes is a good left wing backup. He can come off the bench and he can score. He's proven that this season. You know, if Shaw goes onto the bench with Byrne and you have Botman and another person who's your centre back options, you're very good in terms of depth as well. But you've got a very good record against all of the top sides this season. You tactically outsmarted Amarin, although to be fair, we did have Casemiro and Eriksen in midfield that first half. You outrun Man United. He's outsmarted Arteta, and he outsmarted Ange in those matches. And I think that there's a possibility Newcastle will win that Carabao Cup final, because I feel like the one team, and I said this, the one team I think that will give Liverpool a go in the final is Newcastle. I said Liverpool would walk all over Spurs, we've seen that. Liverpool will walk all over City. Forest, maybe. Forest and Newcastle are the only two teams I would think would give Liverpool a game in that cup final. Other than that, I'm confident that Liverpool would win. Because Eddie Howe knows how to bring out the best in his front line with his tactics, what he did versus Arsenal, letting Gordon stay high, letting players like Lewis Hall and Murphy deal with sort of the fullbacks running back on either side. So then Gordon had more license to stay high and be a transition threat. You know, the utilising Lewis Hall, can he overlap? You want him to invert? But he adjusts his tactics to the game. He adjusts his tactics to the game state. They can do 3 at the back. They can do 4 at the back. They can be attacking. They can be defensive. They can be organised when they need to be defensive. And he didn't have any investment this summer, because I'm not counting Lloyd Kelly. He's already gone. And they had a huge injury crisis last year. There was a lot of pressure on last year. And Eddie Howe's proven, look, when my team is fit, this is what I can do. And I had to sell Minter. And I had to sell Elliot Anderson. Elliot Anderson, for me, Joelinton's a monster. But Elliot Anderson, for me, he's been one of Forest's best players. He's so good. And that was such a big loss. And Minter would obviously, I think Murphy's been brilliant, but Minter, again, is a good option to have. He lost those. And you got to look at last season, because he got a criticism last season, but Tonali barely played because of suspension. There's a huge difference between Tonali and Longstaff. Longstaff might work his socks off, but quality-wise, there's a huge difference between Tonali and Longstaff. You know, you see it when Man United go to Ugarte to Casemiro at the moment. Tonali and Long, bigger difference. You know, that was a massive loss to Tonali. And I think Tonali started slow at Newcastle because he had to get used to it, used to environment, used to everything. And then he gets that suspension, but he's been unbelievable this season. Harvey Barnes had injury issues. But I actually think Harvey Barnes coming in really kicked Gordon on last season, weirdly. Livramento had injury issues and he was young and he was being moulded in, and Kieran Trippier was sort of still sin at the start of the season as the first choice right back. Lewis Hall was being integrated. I do think he could have played Lewis Hall more last season. It took to the end of last season to play Lewis Hall, because Dan Burn, who's been really good this season, I said that, really good, but the amount of stick Dan Burn got last year from Newcastle fans, he got a lot of stick. And he was really poor at left back. When he's coming against a fast winger, he was poor. But at centre back, very good player. Lewis Hall didn't really play last season. Barnes was injured. Tonali was suspended. You know, Livramento had injury issues as well. So the 4 signings that came in 2023, he couldn't really mould it in. So he was going with his squad from the year before that were picking up injuries. You know, Isak had an injury, Wilson had an injury, Joelinton had an injury, Willock had an injury. He had so many injury issues. Botman was a big loss as well. And the new signings couldn't make too much impact. There was loads of injuries. And Newcastle weren't great, but they went on a run towards the end, and you would have finished in Europe if Man United didn't win the FA Cup. And then in the summer, just nothing happened for Newcastle. Lloyd Kelly doesn't count, in my opinion. You went and put 50 million bid on Langer deadline day. You put 50 million in for Elise, but Bayern won that race. That's what Newcastle did. And it showed that they had 50 million there for a winger. I think after Anderson and Minter had gone, you've got a bit of money without PSR and all of that. You've now sold Amaron and Lloyd Kelly on top of that. Gone a year without spending. Newcastle will definitely get have money this summer. Why have I said sold Amaron? Almiron. They've made profit off Kelly and sold Amaron. I meant Almiron. This is why I need to read my slides, because they sold Almiron. They didn't sell Amaron. He's the Man United manager. You know, strengthening their squad ahead of summer. So why do people sort of fear Newcastle? Because one, I think they've got money to spend this summer. I think they could get an Mbuemo. I think they'll get a centre-back. I know they were linked to Malik Chow. They think they'll go back in the race for Gay, who only have 1 year left on his contract in the summer. I think you could probably get a goalkeeper, another midfielder potentially. But you've got one of the best strikers in world football. Isak, you could argue Isak is the best striker in world football. For me, probably is. You know, Ronaldo's no longer at it. Lewandowski's no longer. Oh, he's been good, but like, you know, you look at it and you think Harry Kane. You can argue Isak. I think he's more complete than Haaland. You know, Mbappe's not a striker necessarily. Is he the best striker in football? It's debatable. Gordon, just a lethal player. Tonali, Bruno G are the top players. They're very technically good, and I think them playing together has elevated Newcastle a lot. They have Lewis Hall and Livramento, which for the future is mad. I think Botman's still only 24, 25. He's a young player. And Newcastle shown they can go toe-to-toe top teams in their leagues, but when they were in the Champions League, PSG, they gave a game to. They got robbed in the away game against PSG as well. You know, they're physically capable of catching all of the top sides, but they're massively improving their technical level, and I think they will look to do that with fair investment in the summer. Eddie Howe has shown, look, I'm a good manager. I can change tactics. I can adapt. At times where maybe this time last year he was being criticised for that, he's showing that. They have ambitious owners who will look to spend, and I think they've planned the squad well. Like, Newcastle didn't do anything in the summer, but I think they're set up quite well in terms of youth wages, the players, the technical and physical profiles. That they've got a good squad to build upon. You're not like Manchester United, but we're just a mess. And the money is there to spend, and they could easily get UCL football. You need the top 5, and this is why I think Newcastle are a threat next season to the big clubs, Newcastle are a big club, but to that top 4. Villa have been up there, Forest have been up there, but I think in terms of consistency, I think Newcastle, when they get to the top, they could stay at the top. I think they are on that project. And as a United fan, I fear it, because I feel like United is struggling and further away from Europe every season. There's going to be not just the top 6, but Newcastle make it the top 7. Villa could make it the top 8. Forest want to make it the top 9. There's so much ambition there in the Premier League, and I think Newcastle's one to watch. Newcastle fans and anyone that's not a Newcastle fan, let me know your thoughts down below. But I want to talk about Newcastle, give Eddie Howe a bit of credit, and talk about, you know, what they are building. See you next time. Bye.